David Hewlett. Thank you so much for coming on today, sir.
Thanks so much, Lucas. I really appreciate you having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, you are currently the CEO of SmartLabels. It's like an organization company. I guess tell me a little bit about kind of how you got into this organization, into this company, and kind of what the main features of it are.
Yeah, I actually bought this company, so I can't take complete ownership for the idea.
Yeah.
But I kind of bought it in its infancy from an engineer, and I saw a lot of potential for using smart labels as an organization tool, um, not just for all kinds of people, but for myself.
hmm
We had moved into our place in 2020, and it had been 2 years, and we still had boxes that were unpacked, and we didn't know where things were. I was looking for a Wi-Fi router,
Yeah.
and I had spent 45 minutes unsuccessfully looking for the Wi-Fi router,
It's
which I
always the
eventually
most
found another
obscure
day.
things too. Like the most
Oh, I
obscure
know.
thing, you're like, "Where's that one spatula we had 3 years ago?" Like, where?
The one with Yoda on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of potential for it, and so many more things that I could do with the app, and
Mhm,
applications. The app is targeted towards consumers,
mhm,
which is great because it means that we make the app very easy to use. We have people that are over 75 years old
mhm,
using the app without having to reach out for help. It's that easy to use,
mhm.
and so it's been very fun to have it for more consumers, but also be able to get it out to businesses, get it out to teachers, which we may talk about today, and then
Yep.
administration, and all sorts of people that are using it in fun ways.
So walk me through like how are you finding companies you can potentially purchase? Like what is the process like for reaching out? Like how like I guess just I wouldn't even know where to start with the questioning on that, but so like I guess what can you kind of tell us about that process?
Yeah, first, it's fascinating.
hmm
As a learning experience in general, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So I love talking to other entrepreneurs and finding out like their journey and what they've done. Um, I actually started looking for companies in 2015 and got close with a couple, and they were all across the board. One was a yoga mat company. One was a gourmet sauce company. And the other one was still in food. It was a vegan beef jerky company,
Okay.
of all things, right? But like
Yeah.
all across the board,
I
right?
know.
I look
Yeah.
for opportunity and exciting products over something specific. Usually I
Mhm.
do like to have a little technology involved in it too. So the second time, after those three companies I looked at, I didn't acquire any of them for different reasons.
Mhm.
One, there was a lawsuit that hadn't been disclosed. Second one, there
Mhm.
was I made an offer, and the company accepted a different offer, and the third one sort of fell apart. But
Mhm.
so then I went back to work and realized I didn't like the tech marketing world anymore, and so which is why I'd been looking to buy a business in the first place.
Mhm.
And so I went and went after it again. And there's a website called microacquire.com, which is now just acquire.com. But essentially, what they offer is businesses between the value of zero in revenue per year to 10 million in revenue, 10 million in revenue per year, and no brokers. So you're just having a conversation with the CEO, and again
Just
about
shooting them an
finding their
email.
journey.
Hey.
Yeah, and it's so cool. I mean, one thing that's great about that site, because those businesses are so small, they usually have very niche um, focuses, right?
Mhm.
So I actually ended up putting a bid in on a company that did scheduling and invoicing for ice skating rinks. It was actually a Canadian company. Surprise, surprise.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No
um,
shortage of ice up here.
right? But I talked to the guys, and they were like, yeah, well, we saw these ice skating rinks for our hockey team. They were using Excel, and we thought, why don't we just give them something that they can use? And so it wasn't a complex product. It wasn't anything crazy, but it fit a market need. And so it's really neat as an entrepreneur to go talk to other entrepreneurs about how they found product market fits. So that it was a great learning journey. And of course, the learning doesn't stop once you buy the company, because then you're learning all about that industry.
Well, yeah, because going into education, you kind of go, like I always kind of say, it's a completely different world from anything kind of like business related, because you grow up in school, you go in school, you study in school, and then you start teaching in school. So you're kind of in a weird way, like in this like micro kind of shell, kind of going into education. So you're not really exposed to a lot of the like supply chain management. I'm like, okay, I kind of know what that is, but like not really. When you're teaching social studies, you don't really think about that when you're teaching about the Cold War. But I guess that could be an interesting thing to get into. But so I guess you have a pretty large background in tech in general and like in promotion and marketing. So once you successfully acquire this business, like what's the first step once you've actually acquired
Well, open the mouth and start the
it?
fire hose, I guess.
Yeah.
You get in and you find out there's, this is wrong. Okay, like we got to fix
Mhm.
that. But I saw a lot of opportunity in promoting this business. The person who started the business had basically gave himself a hackathon. For those of you who may not know what a hackathon is, you just it's like you go for 24 hours usually, or 48 hours. You get maybe $2,000, and you have to create a company or a product and then pitch it afterwards. And so his goal against himself was, he gave himself $3,000 to create a company that he thought could be better than what was out there. And so anyway, so he built this thing, he got it done, and once he was done with it, he was done with it. So it really was a minimum viable product. So it worked.
What do you mean by that?
So minimum viable product is, what is the absolute minimum you can do to create a product that people will buy that functions correctly, right? So
Okay.
what the product did when I bought it was, you could put a label on a storage tote or bin or tub, scan it, and you could add name and description of what was in there, as well as a picture. And with that, he also had items. You could add items underneath each label, and
Mhm.
that was with names, descriptions, and pictures. So that was the minimum viable product. And he basically was just like targeting it on. He just sold it on Amazon. And he had a few keywords he promoted it with, and that was kind of like where he started. So when I took it over, especially being a marketer,
Mhm.
I said, "Oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity in marketing just on Amazon alone."
Mhm.
Where he had 15 keywords he was using to advertise on, and those included words like SmartLabels, which were obvious ones to have, right? But
Mhm.
maybe he didn't have inventory management tool or something like that, or things that people would be searching for on Amazon that
Yeah.
this tool would help.
Yeah, it's
And
almost like when you
so,
don't know what you're looking for, you just type in like an overall idea and hopefully it'll bring you to that. Okay, I see what
yeah,
you're saying. Yeah.
or like if you're like organize, storage bins for organization, right? If that's like,
Mhm.
if you're looking for that, and then it's like, oh well, I
Like
didn't even know
people
about this
also
product.
buyed, or sorry, people
Yeah.
also bought, and they'll have like the little thing there. Yeah, yeah,
And so and it's a great way to take advantage of people while they're in the mindset of, I'm thinking about organization and storage, and
yeah.
here's
Okay.
something I don't know about. I'm gonna go take a look.
Yeah.
And then they're like, whoa, this is pretty cool. It takes a certain person, I think, to use the product, because you have to
Mhm.
want to be organized and have the motivation to be organized, which are two
Yeah.
things that can be hard to have sometimes.
Yeah.
But for the people that like to be organized and like to be able to find their stuff, it's just fantastic.
And
Um,
and for even like what you've seen so far with education, like if anything, kind of targeting the workplaces that have to be very organized all the time and everything, like the amount of what's the word I'm looking for? The amount of like filing cabinets that we have everywhere, and you have no idea what's in them, because even just put them on a filing cabinet, not even as a storage tote, like putting it on everything can definitely help. But like, what are, from your experience so far and kind of the reviews that you've had, what are kind of teachers and administrators and school districts kind of using this for outside of maybe even just the filing cabinet or the storage tote area?
yeah, so the ones you mentioned are definitely true, right? And you
That's
don't
the
even have
bread
to
and
go on the
butter for sure.
you
Mhm.
can go, I mean, you can go down to the file level, right? You could put a label on each
Yeah.
file and know what's in each one of those,
Mhm.
which is great. And again, the storage totes for knowing where the toys are or where the materials are for this
Mhm.
project, or,
Yeah.
for dissecting this frog or whatever you're going to
Mhm.
do in whichever kind of class you're doing, right? But like we had a school that was that loaned out Chromebooks to their
Mhm.
students, for students who didn't have access to those things. And
Mhm.
so they put a smart label on the Chromebook, and that was their way of knowing which student had which Chromebook as their loaner. And
Hmm.
so we have those kind of things. We have them using it like an office manager might, where they've got, all the stuff that's in the admin building that they want to be able to track, like the chairs and the desks and all those things, right? So they have a QR code on them to know, like, oh, how many of these do we have? When one of them's gone, let's take it out of inventory and know that when we go back to look and when we're thinking about purchasing stuff for next year, what do we have? What do we not have? Um, and so it's a great way to track all the materials that you're using,
Mhm.
that you may be thinking about. And that I don't know how often they buy them, if it's annually or quarterly or whatever, but it can be a real help there.
Well, even just knowing like what your inventories are, because I know even sometimes like people will forget to go on to the sheet, but you've kind of always got your phone on you, so you can always kind of pull out that phone, take the quick scan. You'll always be able to see it, and you don't really have to like go to someone else to say, "Oh, what is actually in this thing?" It's kind of just a more convenient. You're removing a barrier essentially. Is
Yeah.
kind of what I'm hearing, which is yeah.
So I think, I didn't quite understand the true value of the product until I used it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the true value isn't necessarily that, you've done your stuff and you have it organized. The true value is not having to remember where everything is, right? So like it's kind of crazy how much headspace people take up with remembering where one thing is that they use once a year, right?
Yeah.
That's a space in your brain that is like full of something that can't is
Yeah.
not full of something else. And so
Mm-hmm.
once we did our garage and got all those boxes done, and we labeled everything, our garage it looks amazing now. And I literally, like, I do my like I do the lights around the household. And so
Yep.
I know which light, I'll take a picture of it, and I know that light bulb, the replacement light bulb for it, is in this bin. And I can go in and
Oh.
find the light bulb, and I've taken a picture of what it looks like too. So when I go in the bin, I'm like, oh, here we go, right? I don't have to think about, where did I store the light bulbs? Okay, now which one is the right light bulb for the thing? It's right there, and now I have this freed up space to think about whatever is more important, like other parts of my
Yeah.
business or my
Well,
family or whatever it might
because
be.
you're
And I think with
also
teachers, like, there's so many things that you guys have to keep in your heads. There's pressure. There's how the kids doing, how they doing emotionally.
Mhm.
Are they all getting along? How are they going to do on the test at the end of the year or month or whatever it may be? Yeah, I don't want you guys to have that up there too, of like, I know exactly where this thing and this thing. You can just let that go, and so I think it's
Yeah.
huge.
Because I'll be completely honest, when, like, let's just say I'm in this new semester and last semester's final exams from the same course or somewhere, I'm like, I have no idea where I put those. And like, I'll like find a cabinet, and I'm honestly, I think like my old classroom, I probably had about eight or 10 cabinets kind of across the room on the side. And the amount of times that students probably saw me like open every single one of them and just go, which is probably just my own lack of organization in general. But like the students finish a test, you mark it, and you kind of just plop it somewhere. Like
Yeah.
again, that would also require the effort of kind of going in and actually organizing it to begin with. But definitely, if you have that to help you as a barrier remover from the very beginning, definitely something that's definitely of value. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the other nice thing for educators is that, because this is a consumer targeted tool, it's not very expensive, right? So
Mhm.
you can get a label pack for $16, and then and you can use 12 labels for free for life. But if you want more, it's $14.95 per year.
Mhm.
And that's not a huge weight on your budget, right? I mean, like, that's
Mhm.
something that's easy to do, that teachers and administrations have access to, and that's one of the things that I'm happy about with the product. that it is so accessible.
And at the very beginning, like, I guess, how did you target the kind of education? I mean, obviously, we've kind of come together here in the education realm, but like, how are you kind of finding your target audience for this product?
Um, well, I try to think through the best use cases for the product, right? And so typically, right, like our bread and butter is, people who are organizing their garage, people who have a self-storage unit, and small and micro businesses. Those are kind of like the three main areas. And so I do a lot to focus on that, of course, just because there's so many people within those categories. But I probably discover a new category of ways that people are using SmartLabels every week, maybe every 2 weeks. I'll say that the craziest one was a snake breeder who, yeah, a snake breeder who was putting the labels on the snake cases, or not cages, in there, whatever they're in, the cases, and because snakes feed on very
There's a reason
irregular
I don't
schedules.
know.
Snakes feed on very irregular schedules, right? Smaller snakes eat more often, bigger snakes maybe eat less often, but you've got all these snakes that were born at different times that need to be fed at different times. And so they would put the smart label on there, and then we have an expiration date feature. And they were using that as a countdown for when the next time they had to feed the snakes was. And so they would just get a reminder on their phone, oh, hey, you need to feed these snakes today. And so I was like, okay, I would never have thought snake breeder was the target audience here. And I don't know that they're one that's worth going after, but hey, there was one that was just like, okay, I did not think that was going to be something. And so it's really fun because you get to see these really creative ways that people are thinking about organization and thinking about using the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're kind of just like, you know what, I'm gonna put this out in the universe, and wherever it goes, it's gonna go. But that's, yeah. And so, like, I guess for kind of putting together a team, because when you kind of acquire the product, like, is it just you? Are you with a group that's acquiring this, or like, what does that kind of look like? For who are the people that you're going into business with, and like, how do you kind of
Yes,
characterize
I acquired this one, and I was open to having the founder work with me, but he
it?
really wanted to work on some other stuff, and so I just said, okay, well then it's just going to be me, and I did get some of his time as part of the deal, but I had to go out there and find more resources. As an entrepreneur, especially if you don't necessarily know which direction your product is going to go in, you have to. It's nice to create flexibility. So I mostly use vendors at this point to facilitate the work I need to do. I have a developer in Canada. I have an artist in Australia. I have a printer in Colorado. And so I spread the work out across these different teams, and those essentially are the extensions of my team until I get going in a business well enough that I know, hey, this thing is going to be here. This is a bread and butter thing, and I can start hiring to backfill for that. So, but it gives me a lot of flexibility to shift directions when I'm working with vendors, as opposed to hiring somebody for something specific that may or may not be there 6 months down the road.
Interesting. And when you're like, have you ever like started multiple businesses that have failed?
I have, yes.
And so,
Uh,
what has kind of made this one work out, do you think? I know we've kind of talked on some reasons, but I guess the reason I ask is I haven't talked to many entrepreneurs on the show before, and they're kind of talking about with like, it's only 3 to 5% of companies that actually last or actually make it more than a year or two. Like, what are some of the kind of, to me, it's almost the simplicity of the smart label of like, it's just something that's so um like, it can be used by anyone, and for like the most mundane task that can be actually made so much better. But I guess, what did you kind of learn from businesses that potentially didn't work out?
well, I learned a lot about those businesses, about building businesses, and about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I started I had 3 companies that I started before I went on the buying a small business search.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was a tool for small businesses to help them with their advertising on Google. again, it seemed like such a simple thing, and it did work, and it did help businesses advertise. But um, one, I learned that the advertising dollars they were spending on Google, these small businesses, was not their biggest problem. And two, that in order to get to a price point that worked for them to acquire them, that would be too much money. And so, even though I had a great product that worked really well, I couldn't get people on the phone in a cost-effective way, and I couldn't get people online to put the time towards it to get to start using the tool. So that was an interesting one. The next one I did was called Drink and Hunt. And it was a scavenger hunt bar crawl played on your mobile phone. And you would just get with teams, and then you'd compete against each other in a city. And you'd follow clues to find bars, and it was super fun. So this one was really successful on a product level. Had 6,000 people go through the game in the first year. People for the next 5 or 6 years were still texting me, "Hey, are you still doing this? I can't find the app out there anymore. We want to do another event with you." Right, but that one was I couldn't get enough people into the game at the right price for it to make sense. And then the last one was a wine club, an online only wine club that was focused on people who know what kind of grape they like to drink. Right, so it was like if you're a Chardonnay drinker and you don't drink anything else, right? There wasn't a wine club that was really like for that person. There was always like maybe one Chardonnay, but then there's 3 other kinds of wines that they're never going to drink, right? So this wine club was focused on finding more, Chardonnays within the Chardonnay category, and so that was the goal there. But what I realized was, one, you can have an idea that's great and it can seem like a no-brainer, but you have to be able to reach your audience, and sometimes your audience doesn't see it the way you do, right? Or sometimes it's price point. The problem with that Chardonnay business is the people were like, well, this is my go-to wine at the grocery store, and that's what it costs. And you can't charge me any more than that, or I won't try it. And so, and they tend to drink the cheaper wine. So anyway, that made it difficult. And so again, but also what I learned about myself is that like I can build products, I can optimize businesses, I can do all these things, but one, I'm not great at an initial sale, especially to a larger company, and two, like I focus on the product a lot, and what you really want to focus on is like your product market fit. Actually, are people actually going to buy this thing before you kind of put the time in? And so, what I wanted to leapfrog was the product market fit problem, which was I was starting these businesses which were fun, great ideas, but what I needed to find was a business that had already done that, and then I can optimize it and work on the product to build it out. And so that's why this company was a good fit. And that's an incredibly long-winded answer to
I love it. Yeah,
question,
that's great.
but that's kind of how the process kind of worked for me for finding this.
Cool. Because I've always kind of wondered, even for like, okay, you have this idea in your head, but like, what are the steps and how do you kind of go through those steps and actually getting a product to market? So like what are some of the barriers that like, okay, I have this idea for like a SmartLabels, if you were the founder of it, and like how do you like, where do you go, how do you know where to look for printing? Like, I guess, how does that kind of work for you?
Well, when I bought the company, the engineer I bought it from, his mom was actually printing the labels for him. I was like, this is you can't write this stuff.
This needs to change.
Right? Like, and so, I drove to his mom's house and I picked up the printer because I was like, I need to have the same printer when I bought the company, and got to meet his mom. She was very nice. And then I was printing the labels here in this office where I'm sitting right now. And as I was able to start growing the business, I was like, oh my gosh, I am spending so much of my week printing. And each one of our labels is unique. So like you can buy lots of packs of them, and they won't overlap.
Hmm.
And so, but that makes the printing process a little more complicated because you
Yeah.
can't just put the same one in the same
Yeah.
pack. Every pack has to have the different stuff and has to be printed that way. And so, um, the printing process was more complex than a normal printing job. And so, as that grew to a point, I was just like, I need to find I need to find a company that can do this for me.
Hmm.
And that took a little bit of work too. I worked with more than one printer, and there were clear hurdles of like them understanding, hey, each of these needs to be unique. They need to, the labels need to stick on things. And, it was, I worked with a printer that didn't work out, and I finally found
Hmm.
one that did, and was like, wanted to get creative with the process and how they printed it. And so we kind of optimized it over time, which allowed the business to grow even bigger because, now I can get the print jobs done there. And, yeah, but I think, maybe it's just an entrepreneur's mind, but, I grew up with a learning disability,
Hmm.
and it took me a while before I found the tools uh, that helped me succeed in life and be able to
Hmm.
do school and go to college and get an MBA. Um, what that teaches you is that no brick wall is the end, right? Like you can't stop when you hit the brick wall. You just have to find the way around it. Try a different approach. Go under, go over, whatever it
Hmm.
is. That is one of the things, one of the gifts that a learning disability taught me. It was like, there's no wall you can't get around. And so as an entrepreneur, when I hit the wall, right, it's not a give up point. It's all right, it's problem solving time. Let's go. Let's
Hmm.
just figure it out. There's got to be a way to do it. And, most of the time there really is. There's something. If you just keep banging your head, and banging forward. Um, and so that's the way my brain works. That's the way
Hmm.
that I think that's what it takes, I think, to be an entrepreneur and to turn an idea into something that's out in the world.
I love it because I only asked that question because one of my students that I had before, they actually started like a t-shirt company while they were still in high school. And so like I would ask questions and he's like, yeah, I was dealing with this one like t-shirt like creator like in Turkey that they made shirts at like $4 a shirt. But then they kind of like effed him over for like five hundred
Mm-hmm.
dollars. Like it was a crazy thing. So I guess my question is, there's so much that goes into, I guess, for allowing you to just work on the idea of it, where the other parts kind of take care of themselves while you're kind of innovating it. And I guess it's like, what do you look for as even as the printers, for an example, of how to know that you're building a trustworthy business relationship? Like, what are some of the red flags that you see from some of the places that you start to look and start to contact?
I guess some of that you pick up just by talking to like you're talking to people and you're like you're saying things that just like sound too good to be true. Usually if it's
Yeah.
too good to be true, then it is too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So, is there anything that you can share of like that was a too good to be true without like singling anyone out?
well, yeah, so the first printer that I used, he I went and met him and he showed me the paper and I was kind of like, okay, he's like, yeah, we're gonna get this for super cheap and like we're gonna be able to print this no problem. And I had printed these things at home, so I knew that it
Mm-hmm.
was complex, right?
Yeah.
And so I kept trying to explain it to him, and he's like, "Yeah, it's not a problem. We print stuff all the time." And so, I
Mm-hmm.
probably should have
Like when they don't
thought of
really
it
get
that,
what you're saying, or they're kind of
yeah,
dismissing what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
yeah, like you're a salesperson. You're not, you just want me to spend money with you, so I'll print with
Mm-hmm.
you. Like you're not as worried. You want the sale to get done, so you get your commission. You're not worried about what happens at the back end.
Mm-hmm.
They'll probably be able to do it, but it may be more complex. And so, it was that one almost I wasn't able to, almost ran out of stock and wasn't able to deliver. And then the second time around, they raised the prices on me significantly, probably because they didn't realize how complex the printing job was.
How
Uh,
complicated it actually was when you told them.
yeah, exactly what I told them at the beginning. Right. And so you can kind of pick those people out a little bit. I find that the more nerdy the person I'm talking to, the more likely it's going to be a good relationship. Partially because I'm a nerd at heart, but
I
also
feel
because
that.
like a nerd will like try to understand better, right? Like they'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting. Like, do you like do it this way? Like, what happens if you do this? And you
Hmm.
know that person is hearing you and
Yeah.
is excited about it. And, that is a good, if somebody can, meet your nerd level, that's
Yeah.
probably a good partner to work with.
Hmm.
And
Well, it's the
most of my
difference
current
of,
partners.
no, sorry, it's the difference of like, I'm gonna listen to you, but let it go with the other ear, versus actually going back and forth with you and actually trying to further a dialogue, like maybe before they're even involved, of how to improve the product or how to do, etc. But yeah.
Yeah. And usually, if they're asking questions, is also a really good thing,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you don't want them just listening. You want them really digging in to figure out what your real needs are, right? Because there's times where I worked with a second printer who's great, and I would say, here's what I want to do, and here's how I think you should do it, and they would say, well, what are you actually trying to achieve? And like, okay, well, this is what I'm trying to achieve. They're like, well, we might go about it this way, which would actually be a lot faster, and we could change the way that you think about printing to speed it up as a process as a whole.
Hmm.
And so like letting them kind of take, explaining what you need, but letting them ask the question and then having them take it and say like, well, maybe let's try this.
Hmm.
So it's yeah,
And so,
long-winded
how do
answer to your
you
question.
no, and how do you assess the risk of a company? Because I hear that word thrown around a lot, and like I know from my perspective, I hear the word risk, and like intuitively everyone knows what that means. But how does that apply in the business sense? I know obviously it's you're risking losing money, but like, are you looking at it as a 15% risk? I guess like, what is your thoughts on that? Like when you're looking into
That's a great question. I am not risk averse.
that? Hmm.
Obviously, as an entrepreneur, like we take a lot of
Well, you
risks.
have to,
Um,
yeah.
you have to be calculated about it, but I tend to look at it. I try to do my homework, right? And I will do research before working with a company. I'll do research on their reviews. I tend to try to get a recommendation from somebody outside that saying, "Oh, this is a good company to work with." Or something like that. And then, again, I interview all the companies I work with before I start working with them. And I try to assess, again, does their nerd level meet mine? And like, do they seem to know what they're talking about? Do they have a different approach to a problem? And even then, uh, it can go bad, right? I mean, I was working with a developer in Canada. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Mind C is the name. If
Hmm.
you ever have anybody who needs development done on an app, that they're fantastic. But uh, they were more expensive than other developers, and I was like, you know what? If because I pay them by the hour, so if I could get one that was doing 75% as good as them, but was half the price, I would get a lot more done, and be able to like build out my app more for my customers each month. Um,
Hmm.
and so that was my impetus for looking elsewhere to find another developer. I got a recommendation. They had good reviews. They had a really interesting process for selecting developers in other countries, because I'd had problems selecting developers in other countries before outside of the U.S. and Canada. Excuse me.
Hmm.
And so, all the pieces fit. But when we got into it and actually got into the development, it just didn't work. There was no, I didn't interview any of their developers, and so I only got to talk to the sales staff, and that's something that usually you don't get to interview the developers. But
Hmm.
it ended up not working out, and I went right back to Mindsea, and I'm sticking with them because they I know they work, and like the app is the product, the labels are what gets you there, and so the app just has to work. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm even wondering too, like just saying that like you've been able to speak with the developers at the one that even though it's a bit more expensive, like you kind of have more of a rapport with their business overall.
yep, yeah, and their
Yeah.
process, right? I mean, like you start to know a company, and you start to learn their process and how they go about doing business and what their culture is and stuff, right? So like
Hmm.
I have a developer there that I work with closely. We have Slack, and I can just ping him and be like, hey, I've got a customer who's got a problem. He'll be there, as long as it's during work hours. He responds, we get on it right away. We can usually fix a problem in like 2 or 3 hours. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and customers love that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what customer gets their tech problem solved, like with a broken app, not broken app, but like, some bug in the app is
Yeah.
broken and it would take like 2 weeks or more to get something fixed, right? And I can get it done in 2 hours, get back to the customer and say, hey, we got it done. Just update your app, or we got it done in the background. Yours is going to work now, and we're going to fix it
Mm-hmm.
moving forward for any other customers that are like that. And so that's not a relationship that you get to have with a lot of developers. And so that's like something that's part of the culture of that development shop. And so that works out well. And the same thing with the printers. They're honest people. They're quick to get back to me. They try to come up with good solutions and understand timelines of when I need to get this print job done and all that stuff too. So, yeah, it's a bit of just figuring it out as you go, and that's kind of the entrepreneurial way. Sometimes I try to put some process behind it, but you can only do so much. And also, if you're an entrepreneur and you're just right, like you only have so much time that you can focus on that sort of like judgment part. And maybe other entrepreneurs do it differently, but that's the way my process.
I love it. And I'm even wondering too, like, let's just say you wake up tomorrow morning and you're like, oh, I have this thought, like for SmartLabels, just for an example, like what would be your, like, let's say and you have $0, but you have the idea. I guess, how would you get capital to help launch that product? Like, what would be your pitch and who would you go to?
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, friends and family are the best way to get started. You have to be a little careful with that, right? Because you don't want to ruin a friendship or a family relationship if things go wrong. So you just have to be very open with them about the possibility that it won't work, while at the same time being excited that it will. Right? And one of the things that I've learned over time, and I have a mentor from my business school who's one of my teachers there, and he is always about make sure your customer will buy your product before you build it, if you can, if there's any way to do that, right? So he's all about like putting a website up that sells something and drive some traffic to it, and if people are buying, be like, oh, it's out of stock, sorry. But prove the point that people will buy it, and then go build it, right? Because it's expensive to build. It's time consuming to build. And I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs, including myself, that built the product before realizing if it would sell or not, right? And 2 of my businesses I wouldn't have done if I'd applied that teaching to it. But to your point of how do you get the money, right? It's a lot easier to get money if you can prove that your product is something that people want to buy. So it's helpful in so many ways to try to think of building companies that way, as opposed to I'm going to build a product and then I'm going to take it to market and then people are going to buy it because
because
I don't
I
know,
did it.
because I did it, right? And like I had such a great idea. And it's like, oh, people don't care that you had a great idea.
Oh,
They
the
want to buy what
market
they want to
doesn't
buy, right?
care.
Like, and so it's just like a common pitfall. And I think to your sort of like statistic you're talking about at the beginning, which is like how many startups actually make it. I think that's a big part of the problem. And let me say that it's like so much easier said than done. Like figuring out if a person will buy your product is a hard thing to do, but it really makes a difference, and you will be a much more successful entrepreneur if you can.
Well, because even like all the stories about Elon Musk and PayPal, and he would work 21 hours a day and sleep for 3 and eat pizza in this room. And Bill Gates. It's always kind of that same narrative of it just takes forever, but eventually it pays off. But again, that's a great story when you hear about someone
Right?
who did it 20 years ago. But when you're actually looking to start something now, especially online, when online is just saturated with like information, and it's actually very difficult to put a product out there, even though it is so much easier to put one out there now because you're kind of competing for so much attention all the time.
Yeah, it's like I'm a songwriter also, and
Cool.
I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for 9 years, and I think of it like songwriters. There are some fantastic songwriters out there.
Yep.
And I've been out to some bars in Nashville, and I've seen them play and around, and I'm like, man, that is a hit, or that is just a wonderful song. Like,
Mhm.
and that artist never makes it for one reason
Yeah.
or another, right? Like, because they didn't get their song out there in the right way, or they didn't find the recording studio that was the right one, or the record company that wanted to promote them, right? And
Well,
so
they needed that building investment, kind of like what you're saying. Like no one kind of took
yeah,
that in between step.
and so there's a lot of great companies out there, again, that have a great idea that just isn't getting to market, even if it's a product market fit. Like they don't get to market. So it's sort of sad, but I sort of think of the two are similar. That you got to have a little bit of luck too.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah, you gotta have a little bit of luck to not ruin those family relationships for investments. That
Right.
always seemed like a little, because even right now, obviously, education is kind of moving toward like the ed tech kind of realm, where there's all these different
Mhm.
apps for literacy and math and all these games and all this stuff, and that's kind of becoming this like kind of oversaturation in and of itself, where it's very
Yeah,
hard to actually kind of separate the wheat from the chaff because there is so much there. But anyway, I don't want to keep you too much longer here, Dave, but I do have one more question for you.
sure.
It's kind of touches on like the commentary that you gave for your learning disability a little bit earlier, and again, thank you for sharing. It's
Yeah.
one of the quotes I often discuss with people on here is don't let school get in the way of your education. Because
Mm.
again, we don't teach entrepreneurial spirit or how to be an entrepreneur in high school. So I guess like what are some of the things that you would say for someone who wants to maybe become an entrepreneur, of some of the skills they need to learn and the things they need to focus in on?
Yeah. That's a really great question.
Mhm.
I think one is don't be afraid to ask for help, and actually practicing with your teachers is a really good way to start. So there's so many times, when I was growing up, I didn't go up and ask for help when I needed it. Again, that was partly driven by growing up with the learning disability and just sort of thinking that I was stupid, and that it was just me who was the problem, right? Um, but if you practice going up, getting help, it'll help you in talking to people that have more experience than you, in talking to people that think about the world in a little bit different way than you do. And how that helps you as an entrepreneur is, um, you don't know what you don't know, and
Mhm.
putting people around you that you can talk to and you can be open with and you can be vulnerable with, um, and practicing that skill is something that will really take you a long way. Um, there's so many ways to do it, right? I mean, like I had so much trouble reading, and presenting. I had trouble with presenting, but um, that was, and I couldn't write very well, handwritten stuff, and so I had to find my tools to get around those things. And so, you know, as you're going through your learning journey, however you learn, um, you need to just recognize that there may be another way to get around that, and that don't let things stop you. And that you can the more that you can realize that there is another way to learn to do well in the classroom, um, that skill is going to make you great at business, whatever business you do, but especially in entrepreneurship, where you're going to hit a lot of walls that are hard, where maybe you think I'm just going to give up on this thing, um, and finding ways to get around anything that's hard for you learning wise, to get it done is going to be valuable in whatever you do, but especially in entrepreneurship.
I love that your initial lane into that was literacy and reading and presenting, because I think those are, I mean, literacy is not really a soft skill, but some of the most underrated things that students I find are kind of taking for granted. So I really appreciate you sharing. I wholeheartedly agree kind of with everything you're saying. And I guess to kind of finish us off for SmartLabels, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners about the product or anything where they can find it?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon, Walmart.com in the US, Amazon in the US and Canada and the UK, and or on the website qrsmartlabels.com. Uh, if you have any questions, my email is david@qrsmartlabels.com. Feel free to reach out if you have a question about how you could use it in the classroom or in the administration building or at the district level or whichever level you are thinking about using it at. It's a really good product, and I had and personally, I had some teachers that really helped me get past my learning problems and showed me that I wasn't stupid and that I can actually perform very well so I'm always open to helping a teacher with whatever. And so again, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. I will give you as much time as I can give you to help you be successful in your job, your career, and helping your students learn.
Beautiful. David Hewlett, thank you so much for coming on today, sir.
Thank you, Lucas. I really appreciate your time.